Hey guys, welcome to the first ever podcast. Welcome to, I guess the first ever podcast of 2019 for J&B. It's been, I would say, almost a year since our last one, and we've just gotten so busy with the marketing business since then, and we haven't really had the chance to do a podcast, but we've always wanted to bring it back, and I'm extremely fortunate because I have a guest who's very keen to come on. And his name is Jay Warnack, and what I love about Jay is a lot of people that I've met in the real estate industry. There's a lot of big egos and
no shortage of that.
Yeah, no shortage of that. But what I like about Jay is very easygoing. He's a very nice guy, and yeah, I think we hit it off instantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think Jay's a great person to bring on the podcast because he's very insightful and he's got a lot of things to say. So Thank you so much, Jay, for coming on.
Thank you for allowing me. It'd be fantastic.
Awesome. So, how are you feeling about doing the podcast? You all right?
Good. I mean, I always take everything as it comes.
Okay.
I probably to a fault. I don't.
Yeah.
I try not to overthink things.
Yeah.
I can get lost, as a lot of us can, in my own headspace.
Yeah.
And I find, and look, that's one of the experiences. It's very easy to get lost in your own headspace, and you actually don't move anywhere. You stay stagnant. Mm-hmm. So I think as you get older, and a few barriers come down as you get older, and you've made enough mistakes, you sort of realize, you know what, just roll with it.
Yeah. I think that's the kind of personality you are as well. I think you're very relaxed and you let things roll, and that's why you're perfect for real estate.
Look, maybe. I got to tell you, some people closer to me might say otherwise. And I think when you look at business as a whole, I think you do have to have to get from point A to point B. You do have to have a level of intensity within yourself. Otherwise, again, you run the risk of just staying very still.
That's true.
So there's relaxed in the right moments. There's the right moments to be extremely intense. Sometimes if you have a competitive personality, sometimes the wrong people around you feel that intensity. So it's an important thing to try and temper.
You've got to get your time in that. Huh?
Exactly, like anything in life. But that comes to you, I think, with experiences. Or learning from other people's experiences, and your own personality has to come into it. I know certainly if my wife was here and my kids were here, they'd probably say the very opposite to you. They say, Dad is not relaxed, he's actually very intense. But they also would say, I've probably got two personalities. When I am relaxed, I'm very relaxed. But when I'm sort of if I put it in a sporting analogy, when I'm on the field, I'm on the field.
Okay.
So but it's fun.
You've got to find a balance, I guess.
You do. Like anything.
Okay. So one of the first things I want to talk to you about is, I just want to talk about, I guess, your upbringing or where you came from. So I think you told me that, don't tell me, I think you were born in the Middle East.
Getting there?
No. Sorry. Africa.
Close. You've got the right places. You've got
Tell me.
And I can't blame you because the question, when people do ask me the question, where you're from, I sort of have to go, oh boy, because it's not that it's complex. So, and I'm going to try and speed through it because otherwise it's boring for everyone else.
Yes.
Okay. So my parents met in Africa, in Zambia. They're Sri Lankan background. They met there. They got married there. Mum got pregnant. Went back to Sri Lanka to give birth to me there.
In Sri Lanka.
Yeah, in Sri Lanka, just to say that I was born there. Then came back to Zambia. Okay. So I never really lived in Sri Lanka. I was in Zambia for about 3 years, and then we migrated to the Middle East, to Qatar. So you had that. You had the steps, right?
Yeah.
And I was there for about five and a half years.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And in the midst of all that, there was a little stint in Gibraltar, which is at the bottom of Spain. Bottom of Spain is the Rock of Gibraltar.
Okay.
Not a long time there, but about maybe a year or so. And then after that, we migrated to Australia. So in the mid-80s. Is when I came here.
Okay, cool. So so I guess what was your upbringing like? Did you learn a lot? Did you have to learn a lot of languages at once? Or?
Not at once, but at different times. Certainly in Africa or in Zambia, no, because I was only there till I was 3. But certainly in the Middle East, mixture of Arabic, English, and then a few other languages of the locals around there. Remember none of it now, mind you.
I don't expect you to.
No. And look, it was an interesting upbringing, and probably not. It's the only upbringing I know, and it's certainly shaped who I am. And so I'm happy for the events that have led me to the point I'm at now. However, I wouldn't call it the easiest one retrospectively, because what I got used to was I've probably been to about 7 primary schools in my life.
7 primary schools.
Yeah, across all
Guessing
different countries.
in Qatar, in Australia.
Yeah, so in Australia I've been to about 4, and in Qatar I've been to about 3.
Were you a problem child? Is that why?
No, it's just because of moving around and things like that. And I'm an only child. So when you put that together into a melting pot, what it has created in me was, and not a good habit I think, is I'm kind of used to not having people around, because you don't, you sort of steer away from forming relationships, because as a child I was used to not having them. Yeah. Because you make some friends and then you move on. You make some friends, you move on. After a while you think, well, that's a wasted exercise. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So what it means is I have a circle of few close friends. And again, like we said at the beginning, sort of a lot of time in my own head, which can sometimes be problematic. Yeah. Okay. Which can lead to that intensity I said sometimes can happen. But it's the only one I know. It means I had to develop my own sort of self-confidence and things like that. Yeah. I had a lot of cousins though, I must say, which were essentially like my siblings in a way when we migrated to Australia. And that's what
how many siblings you have?
No, none, only child.
Oh, you're only child. Oh, you mean like cousins?
Yeah, so cousins-wise, I had quite a few. In Australia, we had a lot of my mum. So each of my parents came from families of 7 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of uncles and aunties for you.
Yeah.
A lot of birthday presents for you then.
Absolutely. Yes. All for me, no sisters and brothers to share it with. But that was interesting because I always hear about, people talking about only children being quite spoiled. I think my parents would also agree. I never asked for anything.
So you wouldn't say you were spoiled?
No, certainly not with material goods.
Okay.
The only thing, and this is going to sound strange, the only thing I feel I was spoiled with, I had no one to compete with for anything, with my decision making. So if I want to do something, I didn't have to compromise.
You didn't have to compare yourself.
Compare or compromise. If you want to change TV channel and you've got a brother or sister, they might want to watch another show. So you both have to learn the art of compromise. Okay. And even if you wanted a particular toy, if you want to play with your Lego, and you have to share. So herein lies the moral of the story. Sharing and compromise, for me, don't come naturally. Okay? Yeah. And that's why those who are really close to me would agree, I am a dominant personality because I'm used to getting my way. I've never had to share. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a byproduct of being, like I said, in those situations. Yeah. So I was never spoiled in that I was never demanding. I never asked for Reeboks or, all of that sort of stuff growing up. I was always happy with whatever I had. I didn't know any different. But, like I said, sharing and compromise, I never had to do. So getting into relationships, very tricky. Yeah. Okay, because that's all about compromise. It's all about sharing. And then when it came to the sporting arena later in life, it's funny because I was very good at team sport. I love team sport like soccer and cricket and things like that. But after my teen years, I got into fitness and all that. And however, the part of fitness I got into was amateur sort of bodybuilding, right? Okay. Which is a ridiculously selfish sport.
You got any photos?
No. And none that will ever... No.
Show me one?
No. But my point is that mentality behind it is very selfish.
Yeah, I heard. Right?
And it's because you become very self-obsessed. So, training 3 hours a day...
Did you compete at some stage?
Not at a high level, just within clubs that I've trained at, and I've always trained at gyms, whether in Melbourne, Sydney, which were synonymous with sort of the bigger competitive bodybuilders, and I've met a few of them as well, like at a sort of international level. But nothing I'm going to boast about here certainly. But it's just interesting. I look back now, being older, and look at the personality trait of me and what gravitated towards me, or I gravitated towards. Yeah. And they were very selfish, self-obsessed sort of things. And then I worked in the industry as well, as a trainer for myself and with other trainers and gym owners from a business perspective. And it was always good to look back and go, that's why that happened.
So since then and now, would you say you're still a bit? I don't want to say selfish, but would you? No,
I'm very self-aware. Yeah, I would. I would say having kids is what changed that.
That's what changed you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm very fortunate that, like my wife, obviously, when I met her, and even in previous relationships, but obviously with my wife, she took on that. Okay, this is what he's like,
Sorry, what was that?
She took on that. This is what Jay's like.
Okay.
Right. So that's why we're not divorced.
This is what I have to fix.
Yeah. That's right. This is
what I can change.
That's right. And that's the thing. It's finding. It's like in any relationship, finding that person that's not necessarily your opposite, but not the same. Like there's no fun in that.
Someone who can kind of balance you out.
Spot on. Exactly. Right. And by the same token, I look at my wife as an example. Use her as an example. I'd like to think being around someone like me who had this dominant personality, confident, blah blah blah, rubbed off on her. Yeah. Where it made her, it probably helped her with her, and I see it in her professionally as well, and even as a mum and just as a person, she's a far more confident person today than when we met. Yeah. And I'm somewhat of a bit more of a calm person than when we met. Yeah. But certainly having kids had a big part in me just going, you know what, there's more than me in this world. And that's probably something we'll get to later about your why as well, with whatever endeavour you go into. You need to have that strong why to be successful. And that's something for me is the kids. Yeah. But so to go back, childhood, that's what that was. A lot of different primary schools, few good, strong friendships. And then
would you say you enjoyed your childhood? Can you see it in a good light or a negative light?
It's funny. I don't begrudge my childhood again. Like I said, I'm probably a little bit crazy, but for me, I don't look at my childhood as one that I'd say I'd happily replicate for another child. Yep. But I am happy it's what I went through because it made me who I am, and I'm happy enough with who I am. That's good. I don't tend to look back and waste time regretting, because as a child, it's out of your control anyway. And your parents always, 9 out of 10 times, they're doing the best they can with what's in front of them. So it's not like it's their fault. Yeah. They were doing the best they could, and we migrated here because they wanted me to have a better education. Yeah. Okay. So I'm fairly black and white about that. But I guess to answer your question, is it positive or negative? I wouldn't want it if I could avoid it for other kids. Like for my kids, I'm all about them staying in the one school. Right, I'm all about, I didn't want to have one child. I wanted to have at least two, and I've got two. So that the things I think might be character flaws in me, hopefully I don't replicate for them. Yeah. That's just the way I look at it. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but that's what I do. Yeah. And I was quite adamant about them being in the one school, at least primary school, and then one secondary school, so they can have that experience of forming friendships, and I think that network, it's very important, I think. Yeah.
Especially from a young age too.
Yeah, exactly from a young age. And I don't know if it's relevant, again, because I don't know any different, but because I've got girls as well, it's young girls. It probably wouldn't be different if I had boys, but with what I've got, that's what I thought, look, I want them to be having that stability. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Cool. Now I know you told me that you were a personal trainer back in the day. My question was that your first job?
Look, yes, but I guess I got to temper that a little bit as well. It was an interest. Yeah. It wasn't my first professional career, which is quite
part-time job kind of thing, was it?
Yeah. Well, no. To be fair, look, I did. I started in the gym probably when I was 15. Okay. Yeah. And from that, I grew the interest in the human body, anatomy, mind-muscle connection, all of that. And way back when, and we're talking sort of the early 90s, I did the VicFit PT course and all that. Yeah. Not because I wanted a career in it, because I was interested. Yeah. Ironically, my professional career was very much involved in anatomy and physiology, because I then worked as a medical radiation therapist.
Is that what you studied as well, Jay?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So the crux of that is I worked in the field of radiation therapy, which in an oncology ward in hospitals, so treating cancer patients. And that's what I did for the best part of probably 14 years or so. But whilst having that career, I had this parallel sort of life in a sort of pseudo drifting in and out of fitness world, and that was just based on that business, if you want to call it that, just came off word of mouth and referral from people who knew me at the gyms I was in, sort of referring me to friends who had issues with strength conditioning, diet, all that sort of stuff. It wasn't a career, it was an interest, but from that sort of grew other interests in business, because I then started meeting, I guess, business owners from the fitness world.
Yeah.
And I did a bit of work with some of them. But then from that, I started to work with just small to medium business owners, like cafe owners and things like that. And then I started to realise, well, there's a lot of similarity here. You know, it's got nothing to do with the I guess the type of industry you're in. It's the principles of business, which underlie and underpin all of these endeavours. And then that's what started to sort of grow in my mind. You know, this little seed was planted about sort of studying businesses, how they grow, what are the important points of sort of marketing your business, how to retain clients, because these are all very client-centric industries. And at the same time working with patients of mine, sort of, because a lot of my patients were business owners, and just having little conversations with them on a day-to-day basis.
I think that's how business starts, and what's interesting about business is no matter what industry you look at, whether it can even be science, or it can be music, or it can be whatever. There's always a business aspect to it.
Correct.
And if you're good at that business aspect, you know, that you can take it to a different level.
That's right.
That's what's great. So what was the whole experience like working in the, I think you said radiotherapy?
Radiotherapy. That's right.
Yeah. So what was that like basically, and how long did you do that for?
Like I said, about 14 years or so. I did that at a fairly good level as well, like in Victoria, working at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Institute, and then many of the other hospitals in Victoria, and then moving interstate with that as well, to Sydney, to a couple of bigger hospitals, Westmead Cancer Centre, and then St George as well, St George Hospital. They were great experiences, and you know, it sort of put life also into another perspective for me, because obviously you're working with people of, you know, from newborns to 98-year-olds, all at different points of their life, going through this testing time, and it's not fun for them. And I think for me, again, that's what I got out of it. You know, people would often say to me when they find out what I did, treating cancer patients, they'd say to me things like, oh, that must be really tough. And I always thought to myself, no, it's tough for the patient. It's not for me. Of course, And I'm in a privileged position where I can hopefully add value to their life and make things better.
Did you ever feel pressure though?
No.
I mean, it's a high intensity job, isn't it?
Look, it is. But like I said, for me, it was the interaction, like I said, with the patients, and being able to be there and help them and get them from a better place, hopefully, from point A to point B. And in that type of job, you're not just physically giving them a treatment, but you're also playing part therapist, social worker, all of that. Because you're getting to know them, you're getting to know their sort of, obviously their fears, concerns, their family, you know, whether it be their grandparents, their parents, their siblings, all of that are very much involved in that whole thing. And for me, again, it was, and for a lot of them, it was also knowing their work, their life, their business. And, you know, I was probably, anyone in my role were probably treating from 40 to 50 patients a day, depending. And you're getting to know all these different life experiences of all these people. And I was just always absorbing all of that. But like I said, I was always aware that I'm not the one going through it, they are. I'm just trying to help them through the journey. And that for me was like a privilege.
And I guess it probably taught you, I guess, to be more appreciative than I guess to realise that there's a lot to be grateful for.
Absolutely. A lot to be grateful for, and to not take things for granted. And mind you, we all after a while fall into the trappings of any of those sort of jobs that after a while it can be a job, and sometimes you have to make sure I always thought you got to make sure you don't get to that point, because then the message is lost on you after a while.
Because then I guess at that stage it's not for you anymore.
Correct. Correct.
So when you're doing radiotherapy, what was I think it's an obvious one, but what was the job satisfaction for you?
Look, exactly as you said, you know, it was knowing, firstly, I always had this thing in my head, which I tried to always not behave, I guess, in the stereotypical way in a hospital environment. I always thought patients come into a hospital because they know they're unwell. They don't need to see in a white lab coat and acting however to know that they're going through something. So I always thought, if you can make them actually smile for a minute of the day while they're going through this process, then you've done your job really well. almost make them forget that they're here for not necessarily the best reason, and maybe have that conversation that distracts them from the reality of what they're going through. That was really satisfying. So for me,
I can imagine.
Yeah, and I got to admit, for me, I was probably a little bit of a clown, like at work, and that was almost like a Patch Adams.
I can imagine you doing that though.
Well, I got to admit, because for quite a few years, I was working with pediatrics, so a lot of young kids going through that. So for me, it was a outlet to clown around, joke around, make them smile, make them laugh, while still doing my job. Okay, and that was very satisfying. And then even with adults, in sort of general radiotherapy, it's just getting to know them and talk to them about the other aspects of their life, not this, because I didn't want to ever make it that the disease define them. Yeah. Okay. And as a practitioner, if you could put the disease to one side and focus on them as a person, that's the satisfying part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was that experience, would you say that time in your life or that job, did it make you more of an extroverted, or did that push you to be more of a sociable person?
Yes, I would say so. It definitely did. Again, because it was an avenue for me to joke around with people as well and come out of my skin, as you said. Yeah. Also, as I got better at the technical aspects of the job, like in any job, as you get better at it, you get more confident. Yeah. And then you start to look, well, I did anyway, because I had this other parallel life business world. I started to step outside, instead of working in the job, looking at it as if I was on the job and saying, well, if I was running the show, how could things be better and things like that. And then in my mind, I was always implementing, well, if this was my business, what would I do? And how would I do things differently? And years down the track, like I said, after about 12 or 13 years when I changed career, that was one thing I tried to implement, what I'd learned over those years. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, cool. All right. Now, I guess one of the big questions I want to ask you, I met you in Mount Waverley. So radiotherapy, real estate, how did that happen?
Yeah, well, look, the last few years in radiotherapy, I'd gone into private practice. Yeah. And that was great. But I had a feeling once I'd got to private practice that after a few years, I thought, look, I probably need to do something different. I could feel this itch that I'd had was growing, where I thought I need to sort of spread my wings and sort of push myself in different directions. And then my kids came into the picture, and when they came into the picture, I thought, if I'm going to do anything, now's the time when they're still young. Coincidentally, they were at a childcare centre where I was living in Melbourne, and one of the other mums who was always bringing her kids to the same childcare centre was a principal of a real estate agency. And she actually started talking to me and said, you know what, maybe you should try this. And I thought, you know what, maybe. But before I did that, I, again, maybe fear, but maybe just me wanting to not make such a big jump straight away. I left radiotherapy world, but I then went into the corporate medical sales world. Okay. And I did that for a few years, where I was working for some of the bigger medical device companies and medical technology companies, still utilising, and this is where I felt maybe it's not such a big jump, so I'm pretty safe, where I utilised my knowledge of medical world, hospitals, clinicians, knowing what their pain points were, to work in that corporate sales and business environment, so sort of marrying the two together, and did that for a few years before I took her advice, and then thought, no, I need to change all the way, and I went all the way into real estate. The reason I made that jump was I found that and this is just my experience, so I'm not saying this is the same for everyone, and people may disagree with this, but I did find that in the corporate world that I was in, because I was representing a fairly well-known and well-sought-after brand and product, there's many people who were clients who were saying, you're this, you're that, you're great, you're whatever. But I started to realise it wasn't really about me. It was about the solution I was providing, which, I'm not going to say a monkey could have done it, but, it could have been someone else wearing the suit, and they still would have said the same things because they wanted the solution I was providing, or the company was providing, or the product. So I thought, that's not really giving me a reflection of my own skills. And so I looked at the situation, I thought, well, what's the industry or what's the platform that's going to give me growth where I can actually find out what I'm good at and not good at? Yeah. And therefore, tell me this is where you need to grow. And for whatever reason, maybe it's because I was already a property investor as well over those sort of 15, 20 years, I thought, well, maybe that's where I need to go. And I went to real estate. Okay. And that was quite a big jump.
What was the experience like? What was the transition like?
Look, it was and still is a massive learning curve.
Sorry, Jay. How long have you been in real estate as of
now? About 4 years, 4.5 years.
4 years, okay.
Yeah, so 2 years in one company and 2 years in another. It's been about that long, and like I said, it's been a massive learning curve. The beauty is it's still people-centric, okay, which is what I enjoy. But there are very definite gaps in your own self that you'll find out because of how cutthroat the industry is, which is great. I mean, that's why I got into it, to find out what I could
improve, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely improve, and what can I, later on in life, take as a lessons elsewhere. In saying that, I must admit, I'm still that person who likes to have a few fingers in a few pies. Okay. So I still do some work for overseas, sort of, as I think I told you, the VR company.
The VR company, Do you want to just elaborate exactly what that's about?
So look, that's a company that's based out of France.
Yeah.
And they're actually from a gaming background, which I think most VR companies you'll find have had that gaming, because it's very much about the same engine. And I crossed paths with them at a conference a couple of years ago, and they said, look, we're sort of extending into Asia Pacific, and in Australia we'd like to have a presence as well, and so they're using me on an ad hoc basis. But again, that again it lends itself to that networking and so forth. So, and I jumped on board, but I've been doing things like that for a little while, even with other little companies from time to time. Admittedly, real estate doesn't give you too much space to do too much because it is a very full-time profession, and you need to give it that for the for your clients.
So you would say real estate's still your main?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
Is it hard to juggle though, Jay? Is it easy? Is it still possible for you to give 100% for all your ventures at once?
No, but I'm fairly clear with them as well with what I will and won't do.
Okay.
So for them, I put a lot of expectation back on the parent company.
Okay.
Things that I expect them to do, and I can represent them at certain points of the year at certain things, but there's things I won't do because real estate is the 9 to 5. It's the main thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So I think when you said your main satisfaction from radiotherapy is quite straightforward. What's your main satisfaction now?
Look, it is. It's still finding solutions.
For helping people.
For clients. Absolutely. It is different. And again, it's an industry which is dollar driven. Okay. So at the end of the day, for all the platitudes and all sorts of lovely sayings that are out there that people do for real estate's about this, it's about that. At the end of the day, it's about money. People want the person who can get them the best return on their investment. Yeah. Whether it be the family home or the actual investment property, and who can work the hardest to get them the best result. So, but again, people deal or give business to people that they like, and it's still a human endeavour. And while it's still a human endeavour, there's a lot of relationship building, networking, which is the part I enjoy. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So I think from radiotherapy to real estate, then these are two very different industries. Yeah. And to be making such a jump, from a full-time to a full-time, I can imagine that it's not easy. And I know there are a lot of young people who, I guess, who have spent years studying something or working in some place. And the problem with them, Jay, is they feel stuck. Yep. It's like, this is all I know. This is what I've invested my time, my money, and my effort. Yes. And my passion is somewhere else. Yes. How do you overcome that? How do you make that first step?
Okay. No first step. So a lot of people worry about the first step being the right first step, and there's a lot of fear around. Like you said, I've been doing all of this, I'm investing in this, my passion's here. What if I make a wrong turn, a wrong decision? And I think when you are young enough, I think we get, and whether it be from parents or friends, I think we get a lot of hurdles put in our path because we feel I might make the wrong step. And I always think making the first step, any step, will always be the right step. It's what you take away from it. Instead of being stagnant, being able to move forward. And especially now, I think it's much harder, the way I look at it with social media, there's so many messages being put out to people about how it's simple, just do this, just grind, it's not that simple. And when you hear all this, it can be actually, I think, quite confronting. And sometimes people think that the success is meant to happen this quickly, and if it doesn't, I'm a failure. Okay? So I often think you do need to love what you do, but at the end of the day, it has to be a bit practical. If you've studied here, your skill set's here, your passion's here, if you went all out to your passion blindly in a way, will that bring you money? And if it doesn't bring you money, will you still be passionate about it? Or will you just end up killing your passion? Right? Often we all have hobbies and things we like, we enjoy doing, because there's no pressure behind it. Now,
once you add that pressure,
that's right. We're going to love it as much, you know. So I often tell people, I think sometimes if you've put all this money or you've invested time and effort and energy and education, it's not always about just changing the direction of your ship. It's just keep going. However, you know, keep your interest burning as well. Maybe slowly start to...
Don't cut the bridge off. Yeah.
No, slowly fuel that fire and, you know, perhaps keep both going, you know, in some way, you know. Keep earning some income. Have that pressure taken off a little bit, whilst then slowly growing your passion. And when you get to a point where you're sort of at that tipping point where I could now make a decision one way or the other and it's not going to detrimentally affect me, then you can perhaps look at your passion. You know, and also keep the learning going as well. You know, speak to other people who are more invested in your area of passion.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, if you're, you know, trained to be a brain surgeon but you want to be a rock star, speak to some rock stars, right? And ask them, you know, what do I need to make sure I know what, you know. I'm using those analogies, they're very extreme. Yeah. Often it's not, but speak to the people who are in the area you want to be. Ask them about their experience, and often people's perception of their passion is a stark difference away from the reality of it.
Yeah.
So, and you don't want to find that out when you've just burnt one bridge.
Exactly.
Right. So like I said, keep going on the path you're on, whilst getting more informed and educated about the path you want to be on. So that when you do make that switch, if you make that switch, it's an educated one and not one you're going to live to regret.
Yeah.
You know.
So you gotta take the opportunity with both hands.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And but keep moving forward in both extreme. You know, in both ventures. Don't feel you have to just. Often people, and maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's more like I'm in my 40s, so maybe it's people could be generalising here, but will often say, "I'll get to it one day." I think that's a big risk. Okay. Yeah. For many people, in fact, for the majority of people. Most people have dreams to do something else. Most people never get there. Most people look back regretfully, okay, saying, "I wish I had tried that." I always think, well, don't do that. For God's sake, you know, don't think about maybe one day. Try now. Fail now. Doesn't matter. Right? Like I've honestly done many things other than the few things we've spoken about. I've done a whole lot more, and I wouldn't say failed at them, but they haven't exactly taken off. But I'm happy I tried, and from the trying, I learned. Yeah. Things which I apply to what I do now. Okay, and there's going to be more changes as well. You know, coming up down the track in the future. Yeah. And I want my kids to see that too, that it's okay. And I think for, you know, people in their late teens, early 20s now, I think there's almost an oversupply of options. It's great that there's a lot more options, but sometimes, like I said, it can be too much as well. There is such a thing where people can, because there's so many options, people can sort of start something, end it, start another thing, end it, start another thing, end it. And you look back and think, well, where have you gone in 5 years? And you've actually gone nowhere. Yeah. And then I sort of look back and go, well, how employable are you now as well? Because you look back at your resume and people are going to say, wow, they've gone everywhere. They've just skipped everywhere.
I think the old saying of when you chase two rabbits, you get none.
You're correct.
It's the same case now.
That's right. That doesn't change, you know. Yeah. And I don't think it will for a while yet. And that's why sometimes when I look at social media, I look at some of the messages that are being put out there and think, who's listening to this and who's thinking this and how practical is this as well? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, and I think as we've discussed before, you know, there has to be a level of practicality to what you're trying to do. Yeah. And bills have to be paid. You know, whether you're living at home or you're renting or you're owning, your hopes and dreams and wishes and your ventures, if they're not paying the bank balance, that's the ultimate reality. Yeah. Right? So someone can be on a podcast or on some motivational video clip saying, just do it, just do it. but there's risk. And,
of course.
You know, and that's where you got to balance out. And that's why I was saying before, if, you know, when we asked the question, if you're trained in one way but you want to go another, your passion's here, just make sure whatever path you want to do has that practical element of being able to pay for your life. Yep. Okay? Because if it isn't, then we're now in fairyland. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And that's the last place you want to be.
Correct.
Because you're going to end up broke.
And that's pressure. And that's absolute pressure. Yeah, that's right. And that's right. You'll be broke, feeling a lot of pressure, and that's when, you know, the issues of today, like depression and things like that, can really kick in, because it's no fun having, you know, people chasing you for bills to be paid and things like that. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be careful how much you take on board. Mm-hmm. Often people in conversation I have with people think it's a 0 or 100, but there is actually a middle ground, right? You don't, as long as you're past 0, you are moving forward, but you don't have to go all the way to 100 straight away. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Jay, I could speak with you all day, actually. I mean, it's very insightful and always a good conversation when we meet.
Thank you. Yeah, it is.
But I think we'll wrap this one up now.
Sure.
Jay, once again, thank you so much. Do you want to just quickly plug where people can find you?
Look, I'm, you know, on LinkedIn, I guess if people want to look me up, J.Warnack is the page or the moniker, whatever you want to call it. But I'm always happy to, especially for people who are going through those early decision-making processes or wondering what should I do. I have worked and helped a few people just to give them clarity around what some of the hurdles can be. And I'm happy to talk to people if they want to anytime, just based in Melbourne, obviously. Obviously, like you said, I work in real estate in the eastern suburbs, but for anyone who just wants to have a chat, I'm always happy to catch up for a coffee.
Great, and what I love about, like I said, what I love about Jay is not just because I've worked with him a little bit in the real estate industry, but when I come sit down with Jay, we can talk about anything.
Yeah.
Give me a lot of advice about career as well, which I love, and it's always a great conversation with you, Jay. How was it? How's the podcast?
Look, great. First one for me.
Yeah.
So you went
first
easy.
of many, I hope.
Well, hopefully, but you went. It didn't hurt.
No, it's okay.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the J&B podcast, and we hope to see you in the next one.
Thank you.